Schmidt, and I'm doing this brief video to show my initial impressions of the new Wessex BB-flat Tornistertuba. Tornister meaning backpack or rucksack, and this was an instrument that originally came out designed by Cervini, depending on your preference, in the very late 1800s, right around the turn of the century, and commissioned by the Austro-Hungarian army for use by their marching bands. And that instrument was a 3-valve instrument, otherwise almost identical in configuration to this Wessex one. And then later on, from what I've read, Bob Tucci in Munich arranged to have a small number of instruments made that were copies of those originals, but added the 4th valve. And I believe that is the one that was used by Wessex as the inspiration for this instrument. I don't know to what degree those instruments were directly copied, but the size and configuration is so similar, I have to assume that there was some degree of study of those specific instruments. The Wessex instrument is, being such a small Tornistertuba, a different instrument to play, really. I'm not even sure if technically it's a tuba, although where else do you put it in the classification system? It is still a larger, more conical bore than a bass cimbasso or something of that ilk. It is not a sax horn. It is the bell on this and the throat of the body and the tubing is actually smaller than a E-flat bass sax horn, and a double B-flat bass sax horn, which would be very rare, would be larger than this. So it seems to be even smaller than a sax horn, definitely much smaller than a standard modern tuba. Perhaps it resembles in many ways those early proto-tubas that tended to be much smaller than today's modern instruments. And yet it has a remarkably tuba-like sound. It doesn't sound like some other kind of instrument. And being a small bored instrument, and probably for some other reasons, I personally find that it's easier to overshoot the notes. It doesn't seem to want to drop into the pitches quite as comfortably as any of my modern tubas, you know, that I've been playing for decades. And I've really just picked this instrument up. I'm doing this video the same week my instrument arrived, and I have probably a half an hour of playing it so far. Just a couple of initial impressions. The sound you're going to hear on the video is not the sound that I hear when I'm playing it. The bell is just right here in my left ear, right in my face, if you will. And that definitely gives it a kind of a brackish, bright sound that does not carry over so much even a few feet away. In this case, the camera is probably all of about 5 feet from the instrument. I have a tendency with it, and that may just be me, but I have a tendency on certain notes to overshoot them and flip to another note much more readily than anything else I'm accustomed to. So I have to be a little careful with it, and I'm sure that would improve with more experience and practice playing this instrument. Now in the video you heard me play earlier, I had a little trouble with the middle C, so every note there popped out pretty nicely, but I had some trouble with that. You know, it's in tune and everything, but I tend to want to aim my embouchure to a place that doesn't flip right into pitch with this instrument. Again, I think that is largely due to just the peculiarities of this small size. There may be some other factors, but from what I've read, this is not unusual for even the older Tornistertubas to be a little tricky to get used to. Having said that, there are a number of people who already have these instruments and are playing them very effectively, you know, in jazz situations and so on. And I'm already having fewer problems with it than I did initially as far as centering and locking into pitches. Now, another thing I find with this instrument, it being so small, I think it's really intended to be played while being carried. And with the shoulder strap on it, it would be probably perfectly positioned, judging from the strap positions. Now, here in this demo, I'm holding it on my lap, or trying to, and as such, it's really too short of an instrument. If I set it on my lap, it's only here. So even though I really avoid crossing my legs while playing, I'm going to do it here just to get a knee up and help support the instrument a little better for this seated posture. And let's see, something else from this that might be useful. So much for wrong notes, but I think you get the general idea. And while I'm at it, on the Holst here, it's got some of the lower range stuff. Well, watch that last couple of notes. Here is a size comparison with a Miraphone 186 on the right, a Chervany 683-4 in the middle, and the Wessex Tornistertuba on the left. Almost got to the E. Going down. Trouble getting to the bottom C. The double B-flat Tornistertuba from Wessex is shown here in overview, along with a 1 foot long ruler and a standard compact disc for size reference. The instrument is approximately 20.5 inches long from the rim of bell to the bottom bow, which is about 52 centimeters. It's about 11.5 inches wide from the outside of the bell tube to the other side where you would grip it with your hand. And that's again 11.5 inches, about 29 centimeters. And the instrument is approximately 7.5 inches thick from the top of the valve keys to the tubing closest to the player's chest. Again, that's about 19 centimeters. The bell is 9.5 inches diameter, or 24 centimeters, and the tip of the mouthpiece shank is 1/2 inch standard size, or roughly 12.5 millimeters. Here's the Tornistertuba mouthpiece provided by Wessex compared with a standard Miraphone TU-23 mouthpiece. The rims and cups are virtually identical, and the shank is a standard size on the Wessex, just the same as the Miraphone, same as pretty much any tuba mouthpiece you're likely to have. Valve action is free and quiet. Slides move freely. This is the double B-flat main tuning slide. Has this double loop in it to get the extra length. And interestingly and usefully, it's equipped with double water keys for both parts of the bottom loop. The instrument is marked with the Wessex Wyvern logo, and otherwise the engraving is quite typical for a German rotary style instrument. The Tornistertuba layout in many ways is very close to a standard German rotary, except for the notable reversal of the body. The bell is on the left, even though the position of the valves and major slides is what one would normally assume and expect from the configuration of a standard German rotary. The mouth pipe comes out not that far from where it would normally be, but then once again you're confounded by having the bell over here instead of coming up here. With my hand here as a size comparison, the truly small nature of the instrument is apparent. Tuning slides. The first valve slide is in roughly the position one would expect it from most German rotary styles, except because of the compact size of the instrument, and keep in mind the tubing is still the same length as a double B-flat tuba, but in a much smaller body. So here, instead of the first valve slide doing its usual single loop up and back to the valve, it has the extra loop here. But it is accessible while playing, but awkwardly, because your left hand, which usually would come around here and be able to grab the slide or over the top of the instrument and grab the slide, here has the bell sort of in the way. It would still be possible to kind of reach past your face and pull it up and down, but in reality I think that this is a slide which is not practically adjustable while playing. The second valve slide, again very conventional in position, but due to the small body of the instrument, it has to bow out a little bit to get the proper length without sticking out too far from the body of the horn. The third valve slide is on the back, and it takes a slightly more convoluted shape. It does originate back in the instrument, back in here, goes up, down with the tuning slide here, and proceeds around through another reversal and finally returns to the valve. So on a normal B-flat German rotary, you would expect this slide to just continue up and come back and return. It's got this extra fold over due to the small size of the instrument. And finally, the fourth valve slide takes this path, coming from the fourth valve, making an extra bend, making a complete loop. There's a loop here without a water key on it. Your fourth valve tuning slide, almost a whole other loop of the instrument, and then finally returning to the fourth valve. A few words about the apparent quality of the Wessex Tornistertuba. The company in China that Wessex uses to produce these instruments does a very nice job, especially at the very low price point, Nobody's going to confuse these with the best of the German instruments as far as just, you know, beautiful elegance of construction and perfection in every detail. But on the other hand, at a price of less than $2,000 US, an instrument like this has all the same moving parts, just as many, if not more, bends in the tubing, as many fittings as a full-size tuba. Really, the only thing it's missing is doesn't have quite the same volume of brass. So being able to produce this instrument at this price point is really quite remarkable, and I'm quite pleased with the quality on it. Now, however, I do have some quibbles. As one might expect, the most attention has been paid to the outer body of the instrument, which has a pretty nice finish. I can't say, you know, whether it's going to be the same as the epoxy lacquer that's on my Miraphone 186, for example, which has lasted over 30 years with nary more than you know, hairline scratches in it. On the other hand, it's quite nicely done. I did notice a few small blemishes, especially around the engraving, where it looks like maybe when it was buffed at some point, it left a small impurity in there, just little fly specks of discoloration. I had no difficulty with any of my slides. They all seem to be nicely aligned. The solder joints on all the seams seem to be good. The tubing all seemed to be just fine. Every slide moved easily. All the valves seem to be well machined. I got a good seal on each one when I did the pop test. The mechanisms all seem to be in line with what you would expect from a standard German rotary. The mouthpiece receiver is nice and heavy and should work quite nicely. There's a couple of places where I was a little surprised. There's so much attention paid to the nickel silver trim in places like this where you can hardly see it, but on a place like the backpack strap, which on all of my German rotaries is done with a nickel silver, this one's just plain brass. On the other hand, this is hardly a major issue. More noticeable is that this instrument is very densely populated with tubing. It's very hard to even get your hand in very far at any place before you're blocked by something. I could imagine it would be a real joy to have to repair it, but you know, of course it would come apart with enough desoldering like any tuba. As a result of that, though, I think the quality of the polishing is not quite as good. There's quite a few places that are back in the inner tubing, and especially back on the inside of the main bows, where the polishing is rather coarse. I can only assume that they had to polish this after it was assembled, and probably found it all but impossible to get a rag in there, and certainly not a buffing wheel. These outer loops here obviously got better polishing. They're more accessible. You can get a strap around all of these tubes, but once you get in one layer further, the quality of the polishing is coarser and you have less of a sheen in the metal. You know, it still seems to have lacquer on it, but at the same time it doesn't shine like the rest of the instrument does. They did a nice job of buffing inside the bell. The buffing goes in pretty far, so it's in line with other quality instruments. I mentioned the back plate or valve back plate engraving before, and this is another shot of it. It's a nice feature. They didn't have to do this. It definitely improves the elegance of the instrument. Now here's the first valve with the back plate off of it. The back plate on this one rises up around the valve casing. That would certainly give it a lot of leeway for future machining if the valve wore out, but everything here looks very normal to me. The alignment marks on the valves are all done just like one would expect on any German instrument. There are a couple of things that struck me as odd. For example, there's a scribe mark here on the valve plate, and then a scribe mark here on the casing that did make me wonder about that alignment mark. There were other oddities I noticed, even though the quality of machining seems to be adequate enough. There's a lot of extra stampings on here. I don't know if these are serial number markings or what. There's like a 0 and a 1 and a something I can't make out. And over here is a 1, which I hope means first valve. But then over here there's a 3, which if you took it off, you might wonder if this should go on the first or third valve. Which one is it best fitted to? So if you buy an instrument like this, you might want to go through and put your own markings on it, so if you take it apart you don't get confused upon reassembly. Now here's a shot of the second valve. It also has an 01. In this case it's more clearly stamped as a 9, so perhaps that's a serial number of the instrument. In this case the registration lines on the valve line up pretty well. Let me see if I got to push the right lever here. Not absolutely dead nuts, but very close. And here we're marked with presumably valve 2, but again that confusing number 3 down here that doesn't have any purpose as far as I can determine. Now here's a side view of that second valve. You can see the amount that the back plate sticks up from the valve casing. There's nothing wrong with this. It's just, in my experience, it's very odd. Almost every rotary valved instrument from Germany or Czechoslovakia or anything like that, the back plate may stick up a little bit. This really sticks up a lot. So it's a thick back plate. Nothing wrong with that. While I'm taking valves apart, here's the third valve, also stamped 019. Has a weird 3 on the bottom and then a 3 for third valve there. And the registration mark on the back plate and the valve body, valve casing agree. So it seems to only be that first valve where the back plate scribe mark for registration was in an odd position. And I should note here that unlike even some of the Chervany instruments that I've had, some of them have very odd threading on the back, and it really makes it hard to get the back cap on and off smoothly. On this Wessex instrument, it's just been very nice. The threading seems to be well machined. So once again, I have the 019 on the fourth valve. It's got a 4 for fourth valve, and there's this 3 down here. I still don't understand that, but so everything looks very normal here, what one would expect from any normal German-produced or Eastern European-produced rotary valve design and manufacture. One more note on the valves. The linkages are very normal. You've got the thumb screw adjustable mini ball type linkage on this, so that's a nice touch. It's in line with the times, and I found the action to be nice and tight. There's no slop in there, but it moves very easily and freely. Have the synthetic bumpers on the valve. Assembly seems to be perfectly normal. No shortcuts there that I can see. This is the Wessex hard shell case for the double B-flat Tornistertuba. This is included with the instrument. The instrument simply drops in like this, although, interestingly, a foam case, or a foam, what is this thing, a foam cone with sort of a felt-like material on it is provided, which goes in the bell. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be padding or if it's some sort of a surrogate mute. There was nothing to explain its purpose, and it may just be that it helps pad out the case so it doesn't rattle around so much. Anyway, it doesn't hurt to have it. The instrument is pretty well protected, and there is a place for a single mouthpiece in the case. Now this is a case that appears to be made out of something like styrofoam or some other rigid foam, and then covered with a felt-like cloth and a canvas outer cover, and just has a luggage zipper. That zips around both sides. On the front is a zippered pouch, which is really good mostly for putting in sheet music. And I hadn't noticed this before, but the tuba came with a Wessex cap. I don't know if that's always included. And a couple of Wessex pencils. Interesting. So music goes here. A nice embroidered Wessex logo. There are various hooks and so on here. Not really sure what those are for. The handle is a strap type. Can be carried like this. And my favorite part of it, besides a similar strap on the front, and this is kind of cool, it's just a nylon webbing handle, but it still has the same padded Velcro cover that's used on the handle here. Anyway, I was saying my favorite part of this is that even though it's a hard shell case, it's also a backpack. It's got the two shoulder straps which hide away very nicely behind this big Velcroed cover. So that's a very nice feature. This is the optional gig bag for the Wessex BB-flat Tornistertuba. I presume the same gig bag is used for the double C instrument. It's very close in design to the hard shell case. Has the zippered pouch on the front, which is big enough to hold a typical music folder. Has the embroidered Wessex logo on it. The double strap handle with the Velcro cover. And on the back side, and this is kind of cool the way this is done, a double zipper, each one of which hides a shoulder strap. A little harder to tuck them away than it is to get them out, but they do go away. Ta-da! Now, the case itself curiously opens from the back. The first time I looked at this case, I couldn't immediately see how it opened. I certainly wasn't expecting the zipper to be on the back side. But the horn does fit in this direction, valve side down, and then zippered over. It's a very tight fit. Fits in there with no slop at all. I was looking around inside this gig bag to see if there was a place to put the mouthpiece. If there is, it's well hidden because I have not found it. I suppose it could just go in here in the pouch for the music, but I don't see a dedicated place for the mouthpiece. One more thing that came with the instrument that I didn't mention earlier is a standard white finished leather shoulder strap. This would be used to help hold the instrument while it's being carried, and there are the standard 2 rings for the shoulder strap. The included shoulder strap is a nice heavy quality leather strap with a white finish on it. and it attaches at the top ring, has a good deal of adjustability, top and bottom. And here's the tuba being held with the shoulder strap. It feels a little odd, but it does hold it in the proper position, good position for marching. So enclosed to my brief first impression of the Wessex BB-flat Tornistertuba, this is an incredibly fun horn. I really enjoy playing it. I'm not ready yet to try playing it in a symphonic band, and it would probably be ill-suited for that under most conditions. Its sound is not that big. It would probably be lost in the ensemble, but it could be very useful for me in small oompa bands, certain chamber music settings, for some of my students, especially the junior high kids. They might enjoy playing it, even though they should really be developing their embouchure and their support for the larger horns they would really be using. I could also see a lot of advantage in a horn like this, if not for me, for people who've perhaps had an injury or due to age or other conditions, arthritis, what have you, find it a little difficult to manage a full-size instrument or even a 3/4 size. They can still get the notes on here, and at least in a smaller setting with a fewer number of instruments to support, it could do quite nicely. Anyway, thanks for watching.